The Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee will this afternoon announce yet another massive increase in interest rates. That's the expectation. The market expects a 50 basis point hike, but there are some who believe that the increase could be as steep as 75 basis points. What else should we be looking forward to then? Let's speak with our business editor, Xolani Mbanjwa. Just minutes to go before we get that address by the Reserve Bank Governor. Xolani is with me now in studio. I mentioned the market, and I wonder if the market has been able to factor in or price in, Xolani, a 50 basis point increase.
Yeah, I would say so. Already the market is, you would say the market has already priced in a 50 basis point hike by this time, because 2 weeks ago, the Reserve Bank Governor already said, intimating that there could be a 50 basis point hike, but there are still more meetings until the end of the year, 2 more meetings until the year ends. So with the look now, looking at what is expected at 125 basis points still to be added for the rest of the year, you can expect that there will be a massive hike this time around. So yes, the market would have already priced in that particular huge increase, but it should not we should not expect huge market movements from this afternoon's decision.
With that in mind, then, how significant an announcement is it if it's largely expected to have been priced in already?
It is very significant for you and I, because these things go to the things that we care about the most. We spend our incomes on the most, and also investment decisions that we make, because this decision not only impacts on our loans, our mortgages, our car repayments, and the interest that we gain from our savings and investments. So it is something that is still very much important in terms of also what to expect in terms of what the Reserve Bank, since it's been meeting since Tuesday, is seeing as far as economic growth forecasts are concerned. So we have seen many times in the past the Reserve Bank revising down economic growth forecasts. So there's been
Are we expecting then more of the same today?
We're expecting more of the same today, no doubt, particularly because since they last met, just before they last met, there was the KZN floods, which will have a material impact in terms of economic growth, because KZN has such a huge contributor to economic activity in the country. So we're expecting more of the same, and we're expecting to also hear what the Reserve Bank thinks the inflation projections are going to be, because we heard from SSA yesterday that we are now past the 7% mark, and the Reserve Bank has never mentioned the 7% mark. This year they've mentioned core inflation to actually sit at around 6.3%. We're far above that. We passed that stage in May already. So this is still a very much important decision. We want to hear about how the impact of the Ukraine-Russia war is going to have an impact on growth here at home as well.
And there'll be nervousness across the board, Xolani, won't there be? Because in its last update, Stats said there'd been a slight improvement in our unemployment rate, right? But we're still not creating work fast enough. For those who are in employment, the challenge is that salaries aren't rising to meet the financial burden that many people are facing. You look at mortgages, as you were saying, your car payments, school fees, food, fuel, it's all gone up.
It's all gone up, and if you look at the latest Old Mutual Savings and Investment Monitor, which was released yesterday, it's something that is quite telling how much people have cut when it comes to taking kids out of private school into public school, how much they've cut on streaming services just to make ends meet. They have cut down on an array of things. They are not shopping. People are not shopping where they used to shop, you know, in those branded stores. They are going to corner shops now to get their goods, because times are tough. And if you listen to some other people, they will tell you times are still going to be to get tougher because the inflation rate, the high inflation rate that we're seeing, the runaway inflation rate, the high petrol prices, food prices, electricity prices, those are still going to be with us at least for the next 6 months. So households are doing something about the financial stress that they are under, but we should have expected, Tembegile, as households and financially savvy people, that the Reserve Bank would, increase in interest rates because we enjoyed the lowest interest rates in decades when COVID-19 came.
And that was a difficult time as well because there was basically very limited, the most limited economic performance we've had, at least in democratic South Africa, and the Reserve Bank was then able to stay increases in the interest rate. But now that we are on an upward trend, can we even predict how much longer we're going to have to deal with this when you consider that many of the factors that have driven us in this direction are global?
Yes, that's where I wanted to go. So 2 years ago, COVID-19 came, and all of the work that we were doing to try and grow the economy was put on hold. And then the Ukraine-Russia war emerged, and that's the biggest risk globally to us, because if we did not take advantage when central banks around the world were still accommodative, we are going to feel the pinch. So it was a very, very good decision by the Reserve Bank. We saw them immediately going into an unscheduled meeting to actually do something about COVID-19. But things have changed. Our recovery that we had envisaged has been brought to a halt by the Russia-Ukraine war, and that's a big issue going forward.
Let me put you on the spot. Are we using all the tools in our arsenal to manage this situation, or at least bring down the financial pressure on people?
There are still tools that are available, but because the Reserve Bank, and I love your question, because the Reserve Bank, we're certainly not using all the tools, but because the Reserve Bank is targeting inflation at between 3 and 6%, and now it's run away above 7%, the right tool to use, many people would say, is actually increasing rates. Central banks week on the African continent this week. Many central banks are going to be increasing rates right across the board. So that's the first port of call. When things get worse, then you bring in the other tools that you have. But according to what the conservative...
How much worse can they get, people are wondering?
They can get much worse. They can certainly get much worse if the power crisis at Eskom gets even worse. So it seems like load shedding, we're not being load shed at a higher rate right now, and things might be getting better, and that's a very, very good thing. But the tool that we're using right now is good for this present moment.
But there's also been criticism, and I've raised this with another economist, I think it was this week earlier, about the South African Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee. Some saying it's, in fact, sometimes too careful, sometimes too conservative as far as moving in a direction that would be pro-working class, pro-poor in its decisions.
Yes, it depends on who you are talking to, Tembegile. It really, really depends on who you're talking to. And if you're talking to me, I'd say this trajectory. Listen, we knew that by this time, this year, there would be a 25 basis point increase every quarter. We knew that. So they haven't done anything outside that is a tool that is bringing it into dealing with these issues. And that is telling us that things are not as bad yet as they can be.
Xolani Mbanjwa, our business editor, thank you very much for that context, Xolani, as we count down now, we're 4 minutes away from a briefing, an address by the Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago on the outcomes of a Monetary Policy Committee meeting. We'll bring you that broadcast from 3 o'clock. I will not be here, but Stephen Grootes and Xolani will guide you through the rest of our coverage of the MPC announcement. That is where Governor Kganyago will stand as he makes that announcement. Let's take a quick breather so we can catch him as soon as he begins.